I'd like to introduce our speakers. Today we'll have Tom Hassey. Tom Hassey will be doing a lot of the presentation. Myself, Paul Benbow, I'm a Business Development Manager in Cary, North Carolina. And then Augusta, we call her Gusty Brinkley. She'll be doing the heavy lifting on the technical demo. So I'm sure you'll enjoy today's presentation. It's going to be very in-depth and we'll let you see exactly how we handle approvals. Kind of taking a 50,000 foot, we'll dig a lot deeper into this, but fundamentally approval system needs forms so people can enter information, you can get information out of the forms. There needs to be a workflow defining how you're going to define your approvals process. There needs to be data with this so people can make informed decisions. These informed decisions need to have regulatory data attached to it, and we always need reports. We always need to know, what's in process, what's done, what needs to be done. We need alerts letting us know when there perhaps is a chemical regulation change or maybe a chemical has been in the queue for approval for too long. And here again, we have workflows to help us with that, and we have data visualization dashboards that also help us keeping track of things. So I'd like to take just a couple seconds, about 4 slides, talk about Chemwatch. Chemwatch for over 25 years has been basically providing SDS solutions. We started off actually authoring SDSs, and we migrated to actually the SDS ecosystem that includes managing SDSs, updating SDSs, keeping them current. So we've kind of grown our product to be, totally comprehensive around the SDS and SDS management. We're headquartered in Australia. We have 3 offices in the United States, Tennessee, Michigan, North Carolina. Our customer ecosystem, the top 20 of the Fortune 500, 6 of those have our products, so we're very large, very good at large companies. We're very good at small companies too because we're software as a service. Basically anybody that has SDSs or chemicals would be our client, oil, gas, automotive, electronics, aerospace, research institutes, hospitals, universities. One of our claims to fame is just our fantastic databases. Vendor SDSs, we have about 23 million. We never throw an SDS away, so we keep the legacy SDSs. We keep them current for you. We also have those in multiple languages, so if you're a multinational company and you need to keep an SDS on this chemical, but maybe it's in this language because you're working with a counterpart in China or Japan or Vietnam, we keep track of all that for you. Everything's searchable. Everything's been indexed. We also have gold SDSs, which are about 300,000 reauthored SDSs. These are basically more focused for worker safety and hazard communication. On a gold SDS, we have about 450 data points per SDS. We populate all 16 sections of a SDS when we convert it from one language to another. We also populate 93 country formats, so we have the ability to give you an SDS in one language, one country, and allow you to view it in another country in another language. So you have a chemical that's a US SDS, you want to look at it in France, you want to look at it in Japanese. At any time you can convert it to English and read it, but we bring in all the regulatory data. So it's very impressive when you see it. A new feature we're adding is a vendor gold, and that's basically a new feature where we're taking our vendor SDSs and we're extracting a lot more data, allowing that to plug into some of our systems so we can do some of the excellent features we have, like a risk assessment, or just actually looking at utilizing more of the vendor data in our system. Like I mentioned, we actually keep our own regulatory database. So we have about 87,000 substances and 8,000 chemical families, about 4,800 lists. So California Prop 65, Homeland Security list. So with our system, we can actually tell you if you have a chemical in your inventory that's on a watch list or is a mutagen, is a carcinogenic. So the system actually, via our regulatory database, has the ability to kind of take the regulatory data and your chemical data and let the two interact with each other, and letting you know via an alert that you may have a chemical that has a chemical regulatory change or something you need to be concerned about. Transport codes, occupational limits, all that stuff comes with it. So we won't talk about that too much today, but it is a great feature the Chemwatch system provides. We also have the world's largest pure substance library. So we have about 150,000 fully classified pure substances. These can be really handy if you're making secondary labels, you're making your own internal mixtures, you want to know about a chemical, all comes with the system. And then our GHS classification database, we have about 250,000 substances classified because we actually author, as a company, about 1,000 SDSs a month. And the tool we use to author those SDS is the same tool that we provide for you. Although we won't be talking about it today, our authority tool is world-class, can convert or can create SDSs in 93 country formats, 47 languages. You convert it in one language, click 5 mouse clicks, you have it in another language with all new regulatory data, personal protection information for that country. Excellent product. One thing that makes Chemwatch different is we have about 240 employees, but of that, about 170 are chemical scientists and technologists, chemists, hygienists, regulatory experts. So we know more about chemicals, just an IT problem, like here's a PDF that happens to be an SDS and we're kind of managing those. We actually have people that understand why behind the chemical, and that basically gives us a leg up on everybody else out there because we understand chemicals. And like I mentioned, 93 countries. If you work in any of these 93 countries, just a few mouse clicks and you can convert a document from one to the other. We don't do a simple Google Translate. We actually have a phrase library that has been vetted by a subject matter expert in that country. So when we convert an SDS from one language to another, we actually have the correct connotation or meaning of the sentence when we convert the language. And like I said, and then we bring the regulatory data in from our regulatory database. So it makes it an excellent package. If you haven't seen it, I know you'll be impressed. And just kind of rounding out some of the features, we're .NET, everything's plug and play, we're cloud-based, you basically log into the system, there's no IT involvement or very little. Single sign-on is supported, so your IT department may get involved a little bit just to kind of make it easy for your users to access the system, but basically everything's hosted in the cloud, minimal IT. We basically have everything in modules, so if you say I just want approvals and vendor SDSs, we can basically do that for you, or we can give you the full gamut of all of our tools. So some of the products that we may mention, Backpack is just strictly vendor SDS management. Chemeritis is our full-blown, does everything you probably want to do. Galleria Chemical is our regulatory database. Authorities, our SDS authoring tool. So sometimes we package things together in bundles that make sense and saves our clients money. So at this point, I'd like to hand the presentation over to Mr. Tom Hassey. Tom?
Thank you, Paul. Welcome, everyone. Thanks again for attending. If you have any issues on audio, please chat or let us know some other way that you're having an issue. So to start out on approvals, let's just think conceptually, what is an approvals process? In other words, purpose? Well, actually, it starts your chemical management, or actually your chemical life cycle management cycle. So the cycle starts out with, quite frankly, you have to evaluate the new products, substances that you're bringing into your business process. And an effective approval system provides an integrated approach to these evaluations because it can bring together all these different departments and their needs. EHS, reviews, regulatory objectives, supply chain and product management objectives, also complementing organizational structure, business process, procedures. In summary, approvals is an evaluation process, but it's driven by data, by regulatory data, could be compliance policies or external policies and procedures, but also internal. And many of these are driven by what's required by GHS. So a good approvals workflow, or a dynamic one, enables compliance without, quite frankly, you doing it manually or checking daily or looking for flags when some type of regulatory or policy change occurs and you got to react to it. So instead of reactive, this is proactive. So prior to GHS adoption, the guidelines were everywhere, from country to country. Local regulations varied quite a bit even within countries. Now, as we all know, for the first time, the obligations are now becoming much more similar under GHS. But as I'm sure you're all aware of, it's created a lot of challenges. Well, as I mentioned earlier, a approvals workflow, which is really a pull mechanism to pull this chemical through your business process, it can help ensure that your practices are compliant but also stay compliant. So why? In other words, why do I need to have a dynamic system relative to GHS compliance? Well, again, I'm sure as many of you know, GHS is under constant revisions, as one example. So whether it was planned or not, every 2 years there seems to be a new change, a new revision. And as many of you know, 2015 was a rather significant revision in terms of labeling. 2017 is only a month in, and who knows what awaits us. I think more importantly is GHS, or we'll say the UN, in terms of GHS adoption, decided to go about what's called a building block approach, which is each jurisdiction has the right, let's say, to adopt its own level of revision against what's called undue cost on their business process. While it was supposed to be accommodating migration process, has turned into, quite frankly, a mess. And as you can see here, country by country, there's a lot of variation in terms of adoption. So if you are a global exporter and or you have sites in these countries, you're very well aware of this, and quite frankly, it could change next month for some of these countries. So it's a very dynamic process right now in terms of GHS adoption. And what we're stating, quite frankly, is develop an approvals process and to complement or align to some type of GHS compliance strategy. And what's that compliance strategy? Well, that's your internal strategy to stay compliant. Obviously, each business and or industry segment, it's different. But in an overall approach, you can look at this, let's say, as a way of building your own approval process. So what's required under approvals in terms of review, we mentioned this earlier, are the following columns: the regulatory, the workplace health and safety, global health and safety, environmental, and of course your business and operational needs. And these are the various resources that are available to conduct those reviews, and the actions that use those resources, develop those to stay compliant. So this is, we'll call it a process of building your own approvals process. So the first is to state your requirements or your criteria. Next is use that criterion to build a framework. In other words, as Paul mentioned earlier, there's a building block approach to an approvals process. And what's identified here is let's say, the requirements of each of those building blocks, and then their outputs that you can use to stay GHS compliant. And I won't read all the details, but for instance, I'll just look at alerts as a building block. We'll use this to flag significant events within your chemical management approval process. You may have a high-risk vendor. There may be a major safety concern. So develop the outputs in terms of your needs and staying compliant, and then use the building block approach to build an automated process to make sure you stay compliant. And now I'd like to talk about, let's say, some detail of each building block. Forms. Well, as mundane they may seem, they're like a bill of material. They're an essential part of any process. In this case, an approval system, forms are essential. They're used to capture data, to generate reports, direct or pull the workflow, to trigger the alerts, and to do the database searching that you're going to need in terms of SDS data, but also regulatory data. And with forms, it's not necessarily one-on-one. Many stakeholders in the process can use the same form. In fact, you may want to consider a mandatory form within each stage of your approval process. And that almost would act like a bill of material would act in terms of building a part. In other words, it's the essential piece of data to pull that chemical through for approval. And so these forms can be anything. You can make them to customize. Sorry, Paul. You can build these forms to basically reflect how your internal processes work. For instance, you may want to adopt existing forms and just build them in this system. The next building block is, quite frankly, one of the key pieces of information. That is SDS data. That's your information repository of an approval system. So let's say some of the data that's of particular interest in an approval system stakeholder scenario are the ingredients, the properties, the transport information, some of the hazard analyses. But again, this is something that you would internalize or develop specific to your internal needs. Now, one of the key issues here is based on that above info, to do a review, you got to tap into some external, possibly internal databases. So if you're going to automate an approval system process, you got to automate the access to the data. And what we're stating here is for the above key data points, you're going to need access to regulatory databases, classification rules, the transport databases, and again, some of your internal databases. Regulations, here's the other key piece of data, and this is probably the most problematic for you, because for an approval system to work well, it needs to ensure that you're in compliance with local, national, and global regulations. And I think we all know how difficult that is to keep track of. And what we're stating here is an approval system process. It's essential that you look at an automated use of a regulatory database because it allows you to stay up to date. You can access up-to-date data and regulations, but in real time. And you can do that outside your local jurisdictions quickly and accurately. You can automate these updates. And as we all know, this is dynamic data. It changes often and requires a lot of maintenance. You can use indexing, good indexing techniques to ensure you're capturing all pertinent regulatory data relative to a substance. And again, you do that by referencing chemical families. And you need dynamic searching, the ability to easily search and find this data using these types of identifiers, but you might have internal part numbers that you might want to use and other identifiers. Reports. Well, this is the outputs of your system. So it combines info captured from all your forms, the SDSs, the regulatory data, it's your internal data, and then you generate these reports, say automatically in terms of environmental, your SOPs, your PPEs, your ecotox reports, regulatory reports, and you can set these in such a way that that it's one of the key resources that people have to review. So in other words, a report generated in stage 1 can be a mandatory review, sign-off, approval document for stage 2 or other stages. Alerts. This is something all systems must plan for, because nothing is static, unfortunately, in our system. So this is in a predefined workflow in terms of approval process. You must develop a process or ability to handle special conditions that require special responses. And this could be a delay in the processing of that chemical for whatever reason, maybe availability. Significant regulatory concerns, for instance, prohibited substance. Something that, again, this what's dynamic about this system is we all know with TSCA, this is going to be a constant review process for a number of years, and chemicals are going to be flipped on and off according to that. Your internal concerns, what you have deemed high-risk chemicals, for instance, in automotive, prohibited substances, or the substances from unstable countries, lack of a better term. And also, this involves some of your business process. Now you can pull into the chemicals approval process, and that is concerns about possibly vendors or other supply chain risks. So these conditions, again, these special conditions, you can trigger specific alerts or notifications to certain people within the stakeholder environment, but also external. It might be an email to the CFO saying hold payment. Workflow, that's your logic, your and/ors, right? So this governs, directs, and combines all the components we've been talking about in an approval system. So directs the approval stages and the action sequences and the transitions between stages, sort of the gates that, once upon acceptance, allow the chemical to be pulled to the next stage. So they govern the approvals, rules and regulations, and also what stakeholders must do and what they must react to. And again, they combine all the forms, documents, reports, and action streams. So Workflow provides the tools, functionality, where you can translate any process into a systemized stream of tasks, alerts, actions. In other words, adopt an internal process, but build into it the key pieces of information and outputs relative to, let's say, staying GHS compliant. Dashboards. Human beings are visual creatures. We accept visual data much better than when we read things. So what's nice about dashboards, and Augusta will be able to demonstrate this shortly, is they give you intuitive access to summaries of approval requests, durations of review, the data that you need to understand in terms of your approval process. Number of new requests, maybe you want to see the breakdown, resolved or unresolved requests over time. So take advantage of visualization, because data visualizations of any process is intuitive to all levels of your organization. No explaining needed. Plus, no language explanation needed. Translation, excuse me. Now I will end the slide portion of the approvals process, and now I would like to turn it over to Augusta, where she will show you how it works.
Hey everyone, I'm going to show you our approvals module. The approvals module is built into our Chemwatch package. It's accessed through the system interface through the approvals button here on the left hand side in our approvals ribbon. Our module provides a basic functional structure that will enable you to create your own workflow, allowing you to execute requests for material approvals through a number of stages. By default, Chemwatch has created a 4-stage approval process to help companies manage their approvals. However, we do recognize this default process is not suitable for all businesses. So for this reason, we have developed a process that is highly customizable. It can be altered to adapt your business's organization's current workflow processes, or you can actually just use this default process that we provide, which is illustrated by the image on the screen. The process begins typically with a request by the basic user, then the request is reviewed by a local manager, and then it goes to environmental review. Typically this is performed by an environmental professional, and then finally it goes on to health and safety review, which is usually a top tier safety professional that's in charge of that particular task. Our systems approval constructor will actually allow your systems administrator to determine the workflow steps for a process. So you can use this system whether it's for process procurement, storage, or even disposal procedures. It will actually allow you to assign the steps or approval tasks to particular individuals or groups within your organization, and then you can also set up email alerts for those individuals or groups within your organization. As Tom mentioned earlier in the demo, the structure of the module is designed with an action-based workflow that includes form templates, reports, and then also a commentary feature that can be used in various stages of the process. So as the material moves through each of the stages, the stakeholder that's assigned to that particular stage has the opportunity to review, custom-made forms, reports, and then also provide comments to individuals that are downstream in that process. These comments are actually tied to the material approvals, so these can be accessed internally within the approvals queue, or alternatively, stakeholders have the option to receive notifications by email to let them know when pending items need approval, or you can actually set up email notifications that will signal that an action step has been completed within the system that they need to review. So to show you how the basic structure of the system works, I want to discuss the system setup and how you establish your workflow within the system. So to establish your workflow, first you'll need to set up users from specific levels of your business process. Here's where you would define those users. These users can also be assigned to work groups that are related to their assigned tasks within the workflow stages. So you could set up those groups here within the system. After these are set up, you would assign these individuals to individual stages that you create within our approvals constructor. This is our approvals constructor, and this is our stage matrix. This is where each of the stages of the approvals process is created. And you can see that for the purposes of this demo, I have already set up the workflow and assigned actions and tasks to individual stakeholders within the group. So you'll see that individuals within the approvals constructor matrix have individual actions and tasks that are assigned to them within the workflow. The administrator has the ability to create this workflow. They have the ability to edit stages, add, like I said, add actions, and then add stakeholders to those stages, and then create unique transitions between those stages. This example is a linear workflow, but you do have the option to create parallel workflows and then also create workflows that have different types of decision points within them. So you can see that this will allow you to define your stages, select transition, and then assign those action tasks to individuals. In this example, the stakeholder has assigned forms that individuals need to fill out, and then they've also assigned different types of reports that individuals need to review as they move through different stages of the process. So you'll see here that the administrator has the option to add reports or different types of material reviews into each of these stages. So you can see that we have environmental reports, we have risk assessment reports, PPE reports, and other types of reports that you can add into each individual stages. Additionally, you also have the option to add custom forms into the system using our Form Builder tool. So you'll see here, this is where you would give specific details regarding the information you are trying to capture in your form. I will go ahead and click on a form that I've already pre-created. As you can see, administrators have the ability to add a large variety of custom fields. We have single line text fields, plain text fields, checkboxes, multi-line text, date pickers, and then also different types of separators, and also an upload tool. Here is where you would actually use the tools to add information. You can add labels and descriptions, you can add multiple items, and then you can also make these fields required as well. So if that information is pertinent to your process, I would suggest making that field required. Additionally, you'll see that you can add several line items here. Really, there's no limit to how many items you can add to a particular form, but we do suggest you keep those shorter, just so it makes it easier for individuals to fill those forms within the process. But you could certainly model these after any type of form that you have that currently exists in your workflow. So it adds that type of flexibility. So let's go ahead and show how you would use the system in a live demonstration. So in this live demonstration, again, I have created a workflow based on the workflow that I just described. This workflow has 4 stages. It has a basic user, a manager, an environmental personnel, and then also a safety personnel. And we're going to work through each of these individuals and their tasks in order to show you how the approvals module works. So I'm going to go ahead and log in as a basic user. And in this example, we are going to be requesting that a chemical be brought on site. So in order to initiate this process, the basic user will actually search for an item. They'll have to select a document, and then they'll search for the items, SDS, that they're wanting to bring on site. Now our system, you can search through the full database or you can search through your own. So if this material already exists, they'll be able to see whether that SDS is already on site, or they can find the vendor or manufacturer SDS within our full library. In this case, I'm going to view the Chemwatch SDS, make sure this is the SDS that I'm looking for, and then after they find the material they're looking for, they would send this item to approval. So this will actually launch the system into the approvals queue where they will start the approvals process for this particular material. You'll see in this example that we have a form that this basic user must fill out before they can continue the process. So you'll see that these are the forms that you can create within your system. And again, like I said, these can be modeled after any type of form that you are using currently. And so they would be required to fill out this form. And again, some of these fields might be required or might not be required depending on your specific needs. We'll submit this information and then move on to the next stage. In this example, this individual is required to select an area in which this chemical will reside or be stored. So I will go ahead and assign it to an area. And you also have the opportunity to assign it a weight or volume within the system, and that will allow you to keep track of how much is being stored in each location. And you can even store this in multiple locations if you would like. After this individual has completed all of the necessary documentation, they will be required to submit this form, and it will move into the next stage of the process. In this case, this will move to the manager or the local manager there within their facility. Now, I mentioned earlier that our system has a notification system that is built into our module. Now, again, these notifications can be received either internally within the module, or the stakeholders have the option to receive email alert. This is an example of an email alert that a stakeholder might receive. You'll see that it says that there's a new pending request for a material within a particular area, and it says which stage it has been sent to. Additionally, we have links embedded in these emails that will take you directly to that particular approvals module so that they can actually be linked directly to that particular request. So you'll see these pop up periodically throughout the demonstration. So just know that we do have email applications set up here in the system. Now let's go ahead and move into the next stage where, again, we're the local manager and the basic user has just sent us an approval request for a chemical that you want to bring on site. So as the local manager, I'm going to go into my approval system. Again, I could go through the link in my email, or I could just go here into my pending queue. You'll notice that within these queues, they have multiple tabs that they can view. They can items that have been reviewed, approved, rejected, canceled, and then they can also see their individual requests. In this case, we're going to go ahead and see our pending item that just came in from our basic user. Now to review this, you just simply click on it. In this case, this manager is required to review the form that that basic user filled out. Additionally, this manager has the opportunity to edit this as needed. Also, they have the opportunity to edit any of the other information that the basic user submitted. In this case, it was defining an area that that particular material would reside. The manager has the option to change that if it was maybe put in the wrong area, or maybe they want to put it in multiple areas. Additionally, this manager is responsible for reviewing specific information and reports regarding the material that's being brought on site. In this case, the manager is required to review placarding information. Additionally, the manager is also required to review incompatibilities that are associated with this particular chemical. This is our incompatibility report, and this is one of the many reports that Chemwatch offers. And you'll see here that it will actually indicate what other chemicals there are incompatibilities with, and additionally you can see suggestions on how you would like to store those. Additionally, this manager is required to perform a risk assessment assessment on this particular chemical. We also provide a risk assessment tool. So here is where they would go in and make an assessment of that particular chemical and view documents that are related to that chemical safety. After all of these stages have been completed, the manager has the option and the opportunity to either move this into the next stage, or they can return it to the individual, the basic user, and they could, maybe return this so that that basic user could modify, the storage location or provide recommendations on how to edit any information in the process or any information in the form, or they have the opportunity to reject it. So that would actually stop this process altogether, and it would cancel this item within the process. In this case, we're going to submit it to the next stage, and we are going to move into our environmental manager's queue. So again, we have now logged in as a different user. I hope this is clear that we're logging in as different individuals. So you'll see here we are now the environmental manager, and we can see we have one pending item. And this environmental manager is also required to review this form. However, you do not have to have every individual within the stage review the same form. You can actually embed different forms in the process if you have multiple forms that are required. Additionally, this environmental professional will be required to review our environmental report. This report is rather in-depth, and it actually provides information on toxicity, ecotoxicity, environmental fate. After this individual has reviewed all of the necessary information and reports, again, they have the option to either submit this to the next stage, reject it, or return it if they have concerns. We're going to go ahead and submit it to our final stage in the process, and this is going to be the health and safety review. And so we are going to log in as our environmental health and safety professional and then go into his approvals module. You'll see here within his approvals module that his module looks a little different than some of the other managers that are involved in the approvals process. You'll see here that he has all of the same tabs that I showed you earlier, but he also has an administrative tab, so he can see other information that is associated with this particular approval. We'll go ahead and review the pending item here in his queue, and again, it's going to look very similar. He's going to have items that he's going to need to review, but these are going to be very specific to his specific job function. In this case, which is health and safety, you'll see that he will need to review the mini SDS and then also review some of the first aid and emergency information. Additionally, he is responsible for reviewing firefighting information that's associated with this. And again, these are reports that are provided by Chemwatch, and these are very valuable because you're actually able to embed these within your process so that you can actually harness the information that both Paul and Tom referred to earlier. Now, once he has completed the process, he has the option to reject it or return it, as in the previous stages, but then now he has the option to approve. Since this does not say submit and it actually says approve, this means that it's going to be committed to the database and placed in the particular area that it was designated to go. So he has the final approval authority on this particular item, and he also has the option to notify users that were upstream in the process to let them know that this item can now be brought on site and has in fact been approved by all of the relevant personnel involved in that process. One thing that I would like to talk about in more detail is this administrative queue that is located in this particular individual's approvals module. You'll see here that each individual approval is assigned a number, so it's easy to locate these items. You'll see that it also states the stage name, the action name, and then other material information that's relevant to that chemical. Additionally, you can see the status. So this will help you see whether the item has been approved or canceled or rejected. And all of these fields are dynamically sortable, so you can actually sort these by, the item that you're looking for. Additionally, you can also see the history of the item. I mentioned earlier a few times that you have email alerts in the system, and you can actually provide comments within the system. Here's where you can see a complete history of when those comments were made, the date that it was approved or went through a particular process or stage, and who was responsible for it. So that history can be useful whenever you're trying to keep records of when these approvals were completed and when that item was brought on site. So this information is useful to you when you're wanting to view information that's related to an individual approval or maybe even multiple approvals, so that you can view that quickly and easily. Additionally, we have system dashboards that also allow you to view information quickly and easily with regard to approvals, but then also other things. Those that are specific to approvals is you can actually see approvals completed by stage. You can see approvals duration by stage, so you can see how long it's taking people to complete an individual approval. And additionally, you can see your approval status over time. So these are all metrics that will help you keep track of those individual items that are being approved or brought onto your site. So that actually takes care of most of the basic features of our approvals module. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton back to Tom so that he can wrap up and conclude the webinar.
Hey, Gusty, that was great. You did a great job on that, and I appreciate your hard work. One quick reminder, we've got like 4 slides. We're right on time. We're going to go into the Q&A here in about 5 minutes. So if you have any questions, please submit them. And I wanted to point out one thing. We love to show how complicated our product is and how we can handle most scenarios, but we can also do very simple approval processes. So simple as possible, and I want to make sure I leave you with that. And in the future, you may adopt a more complicated workflow or, of your approvals process. We can do that. So we want to kind of leave you with the understanding that it can be as simple as you want or it can be as complicated as you want. So the slide in front of you, basically we're just going to talk about the basics, in a slight recap. A stage is basically a request, who is, wanting this approval stage. The action is what happens inside the stage, and then the transition is, how we handle this. So it's just kind of a, a very basic recap. So each stage has an owner in our system, and the owner is a stakeholder that's responsible, and we basically document that and keep that in our part of our system. And in larger organizations, stakeholders may be governed by a user group perhaps. So this slide has got a lot of information on it, but I think one thing that I want to leave you with is that we have really good data, and as you saw Gusty go through the presentation, almost at her fingertips was all this wonderful data, the environmental data, hazard data, run a risk assessment. All that stuff is driven by the data that we have. So it allows you to make intelligent decisions. It makes you look good. So as you're going through and you're doing your job as a safety professional, you have good information, you're presenting good information. People are making decisions on good information. And that's really the power of Chemwatch, is we give you that good information. So as you're looking at the slide in front of you, everything kind of ties together, the regulatory data, inventory management, SDS services, the substance data, all that is driven through our unified model, which is all part of our software as a service system. So our core business is making sure that all this happens and makes you look good. So my final slide before the Q&A is just kind of talking about, all of the smarts that you need are included with the system. So the expertise, our global team of experts, as I start off kind of talking about the 170 professionals that work with us at Chemwatch. The data we have, you saw it, Gusty, it's fantastic. It's going to help you make excellent decisions. Everything is hosted on our platform. There's very little IT involved. When you open up the approvals process, we allow any user that comes in at a level of our system that has approvals to be part of the approvals process. We don't charge you any more money for that. So there's no hidden licensure fees. You're basically anybody that's a user can be part of the approvals process. So, and our solution will, it basically helps you save money because it allows you to maybe not subscribe to different data sources. You may be providing or paying for a subscription to a service that provides data. Chemwatch gives you that regulatory database, for example. And basically your business is future-proof. You are doing making good decisions and understanding what you're getting into with the chemicals you're bringing into your company, because you have the good information and you have good processes to document what you did and when you did it and why you did it and who did it. And you know, at the end of the day, it's going to make you look good, and I think that's the goal. So now I'd like to open up the question and answer session. Nora, would you like to chime in and kind of see what we have and see what the team can answer?
Sure, absolutely. We had actually lots of questions come in today, which is great. I'm glad that everybody is so interested in that. We're always happy to see that. I'm going to go through a couple of questions that I haven't answered. As the questions have been coming in through the webinar, I've been answering them in real time, and I will go over a few of those in case not everyone is seeing the question log. But let me go ahead and answer a couple that have come in just right now that I haven't answered publicly yet. One of the questions is, I would like to get a list of chemicals that have restrictions by CAS number so that in our document control system I can identify raw materials that contain that substance and which law restricts, bans, or controls it. So one of the things we have links to a regulatory database of about 4,800 regulatory lists within our software. When you pull up a chemical, it is automatically linking to all of those to tell you right away which regulations are listing that chemical, and so you can find out more about that. So that actually is a part of our service, and we'd be delighted to show you that at any time. If we have a little time at the end of this, we can at least show you a glimpse of where that is within the software. If we don't have time today, we would enjoy getting together with you after the webinar to tell you a little bit more about that. But we do link to these regulatory databases. So yes, we do. And then another question is, we have a requisition form. Can you customize the way the form looks from top to bottom versus left to right? For example, we have our logo on the top left and the vendor address under that, and there are columns. So Gusty, I'm going to turn that one over to you if you don't mind. Can you tell them a little bit more about customizing the form? I think she's muted.
The form is, it's very customizable. However, you cannot customize it from left to right or add logos. However, we do have an approvals team that is dedicated to serving customers and creating custom forms for them. So it is definitely something that we can do for you, but it would be an additional cost. It wouldn't be included in our basic form builder package.
All right, great. Thank you, Gusty. And another question that came in, and this one's going to be for either Paul or Tom. It says, please discuss the options you offer in terms of pricing your consulting services and access to the program.
Tom, you want to take this one?
Sure. It's a subscription-based product that depends upon the number of chemicals being managed, geographic sites that hold chemicals, and what we look at is if it's within 10 miles, we combine it as one site. And then also how many simultaneous users are accessing what will be a customized database for you of your own chemicals. So we create a database. Let's say you have 5,000 chemicals. We create a database of those 5,000 and firewall it, quite frankly, from any other customer. But it has direct links to our master SDS and regulatory databases. So your data stays fresh, but no one can see it or touch it. So we need to know how many chemicals are you going to store, how many sites that will physically hold them, and of course the number of users. We also have an option called Data as a Service, where you can just pull chemical data into an existing IT platform. It might be an ERP system or your own database, and you can pull data in on what we call data points, which is by, let's say, the number of chemicals and how many data points per chemical. An example might be you want to pull all DOT-related data points against a specific chemical, and you could do that with our Data as a Service.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. And then I have a couple other questions that were really good ones and really applicable to this approvals specifically. One of the questions was, are the forms able to contain decision logic? And yes, they are. Today we focus primarily on a linear model, but we do have decision points that can be incorporated within the approvals and workflow model. So yes, we could accommodate different decision points and different routes that you need your workflow to go. And then another important question is, can the forms be built by the customer or do they have to be built by Chemwatch? We can do either one. The forms are customizable and you can do that. You could ask us to do it. But usually when people do purchase this approvals module, we do walk hand in hand with them for a while to make sure that they aren't having any trouble with it. The approvals can be fairly complicated because, as you know, your workflow is often fairly complicated. You do have decision points. You do have different people who are in charge of it. So we are happy to work hand in hand with you as you go through that process and either having us do that for you or doing that yourself. So either one should be fine. And then, let's see, we had one more question. It says, let's say I have several people assigned to the approvals chain and one of them goes on vacation or quits or is otherwise unavailable to do their part. What happens to that approval? Can someone else, like a manager, go in and approve their step? Gusty, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, sure. Yes, absolutely. The administrator is the super user in the system, and as a super user, they have the authority to approve items of lower level managers if or when those managers are out of office. Additionally, the administrator has the power to assign multiple stakeholders to a particular stage. So thus, if one of those stakeholders are out of office, or the other stakeholder assigned to that stage can take over their counterparts' approval activities or responsibilities.
All right, so that's all the questions that I have. I do have one request if we have a little bit of time. So Tom and Paul, I'll let you determine if we have time. I had one request to look up a particular chemical and see what types of regulations popped up with those. Do we have a moment or two to do that, or do we need to take that offline?
Well, what I'm thinking is, let's go ahead and conclude the webinar, but leave everything open. Okay. I'll turn the recording feature off, and then you can just do that, because, I mean, I'm here all day. It's okay. I've got nothing more pressing than to show off the system. So I would like to plug our next webinar is March 2nd, so, a month from today, and it'll be on chemical risk assessment and, how the GHS complements risk assessment process. And, with the TASCA and some of the new things coming, we're seeing a lot of interest in risk assessment. So this is a very timely webinar. And then lastly, you'll get a copy of this presentation as well as a copy of all the PowerPoints. So you'll actually get a link to the recording and the PowerPoints, and then also in that email, there will be a link just to register for that session. So it'll be quite easy to register for that. And at this point, I'd like to thank the fine team that I have around me that allowed us to give a great presentation. And I'm going to turn the recording off, and I'll hand it right back to Nora. So thank you all for attending, and if you need to go, that's fine. Tom, you want to have a final comment?
Sure, and thank you. Thanks again for everyone attending. But Paul, I'd like to ask, why don't we keep the recording going and have Nora answer those two that question, but also, Nora, the question on restrictions based on cast number? Because
yes, I can show that. I can show that as well, and I think that's even the same questioner.
Great. I think it's a very, very powerful feature of our system to tag chemicals with properties of interest.
Okay, good point, Tom. Do you want me to give the control to you, Nora, or would you want to give it to Nagasti?
Sure, you can give it to me.
Okay, here you come.
And make sure my screen is ready to be shown to people. Hang on a minute.
Yeah, I don't want to be embarrassed. Okay, you should have it.
Turn off my emails for...
Paul, can you stay on to end the recording when we're done?
Yeah, I'm here till, I got nowhere else to go, so. I can see a flower.
All righty. See, that's pretty. All right. Let me pull that question up so I can pull up the right chemical. So Dave, you were the one asking this question. So you asked if I could pull up benzene or toluene or ethylbenzene or acetone to show you what that shows us. So I'll pull up toluene. So the way that our system works is it's going to pull up by jurisdiction. We cover the whole world. We cover 47 languages, just countries all over the world. And so when we pull up one of our gold SDSs, these are the ones that are written by our chemists, our hygienists, our toxicologists. It's going to pull up an SDS based on the jurisdiction that I've chosen. In this case, I've chosen United States English. It's rendering that document in real time. It's pulling all of that information in real time, including the regulatory information for this product. So this is the Section 15 regulatory information for toluene, and it's going to tell us all of the regulatory lists in the United States where toluene is mentioned. You would want to know, of course, what each of these does, and you can look that up, but this is just going to give you a list of where all it is regulated. If I change my country, let's change it to another English-speaking country, so I'll change it to Australian English. And it's going to then pull up the regulations. I've still got toluene as my chemical, and it's going to pull up the same chemical, but for Australia, and it's going to list then where it can be found on Australian regulations. And so we have, as you can see, if I click on this flag up here, we have all of these countries represented with their languages. So whichever jurisdiction I choose, it's going to pull from those regulatory lists so you can tell where it's regulated in those jurisdictions. All right, and then your other question was about the regulations. Let me show you the best way to show you a list of what we have. We have about, like I said, 4,800 of them, so there are lots and lots of lists that we are pulling from. The easiest way to show you what those are is through our query builder. One of the things you can do in our system is you can have the system automatically tag and flag materials that can be found on any particular regulatory list or even on a combination. So you could find products that are listed in multiple regulatory lists if you'd like. So I'm just going to show you, this is a query that I already have running behind the scenes to pull up chemicals on the GADSOL list. But you can see if you come here that we have thousands of lists that you can pull from. You can go ahead and filter those by country or jurisdiction. So if you're only looking for regulatory lists in the United States, for example, you can go ahead and filter it there. I see that you do have global locations that you would need to pull from, so you could select the different jurisdictions that you wanted to pull. I'm just going to pick two at random, and so now it'll pull up all the regulatory lists in both of those countries or both of those areas. So then you could come through here, find the one you need, and you could add it to this query. So that's how you do the query builder, but that's also a glimpse of the regulatory lists that we offer. Does that answer your question? Okay, yeah, I see that you have responded. Yes, it did. All right, so let me make sure that I've addressed everything that we were going to talk about there. Yeah, I think that we did. We are always happy to meet with you after this webinar to show you things that are specific to your business or specific to your needs, so please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you are interested in that, and we'd love to work with you.
Wow, Nora, that was great, and just right off the cuff too. So, and you know, and as I look at, yeah, I know you're the best. As I look at this, you know, and it's like, you know, software as a service is such a beautiful thing we take for granted because, you know, Nora just kind of went into it and was able to go in the system. But, you know, you could do this when you're at home if there's something that needs to be done, you want to check something out. I mean, it's, you know, cloud-based software. It's a wonderful thing. So anyway, but without further ado, anybody else have any closing comments on our team before we wrap this up? Tom?
All said, Paul. Thank you. Thanks again, everyone.
All right. Hey, well, thanks everyone for joining us, and be looking for our email, and it'll have copies of everything. So thank you again for joining us. Have a good day.